Marcus stood at the altar in a borrowed suit that didn't quite fit, his hands trembling as he watched his bride roll down the aisle in her wheelchair, and in that moment, he hated himself more than he ever thought possible. The church was filled with hundreds of guests he'd never met, all wearing designer clothes that cost more than he'd earned in years, all staring at him with barely concealed contempt because they knew exactly what he was, a desperate man selling his soul for money. 3 months earlier, Marcus had been a different person. He'd been a father who worked 3 jobs to keep his daughter Lily alive. At 7 years old, she needed a heart transplant that insurance wouldn't cover, and the medical bills had already consumed everything he owned. He'd sold his house, his car, every possession of value, and still it wasn't enough. The doctors gave her 6 months, maybe less, and Marcus had spent every night on his knees begging a God he wasn't sure existed for a miracle he didn't deserve. The miracle came in the form of Olivia Chen, though at first it felt more like a devil's bargain. She was 32, a tech billionaire who'd built an empire from nothing, and a car accident 2 years prior had left her paralyzed from the waist down. Her assistant found Marcus through a private agency that specialized in unusual arrangements. The offer was simple and brutal in its honesty. Olivia needed a husband for personal reasons she didn't care to explain. Marcus needed money to save his daughter. She would pay for Lily's surgery and all medical expenses, plus give Marcus $5 million, in exchange for a marriage that would last exactly 1 year. After that, they'd divorce quietly, and he'd never see her again. Marcus had sat in that glass tower office overlooking the city, looking at the contract that would save his daughter's life and destroy what was left of his integrity. Olivia had watched him with dark, unreadable eyes, sitting perfectly still in her custom wheelchair, her face beautiful and cold as marble. She told him she didn't expect love or even pretense in private. This was a business transaction. He would live in her mansion, appear at necessary social functions, and play the role of devoted husband in public. In private, they would be strangers sharing an address. He'd signed the papers with a hand that shook so badly he could barely write his name. Lily's surgery was scheduled for the following week. She pulled through, and as Marcus sat beside her hospital bed watching her sleep with a new heart beating in her small chest, he'd wept with gratitude and shame in equal measure. He'd saved her life by becoming something he'd promised himself he'd never be, a man without honor. The wedding was Olivia's idea, though Marcus suspected it was really her mother's. Mrs. Chen was a formidable woman who'd built the family's first fortune in real estate and had very specific ideas about propriety and appearances. If her daughter was going to marry, it would be done properly, with all the traditional ceremony that their social position demanded. Marcus went through the motions like a puppet, being fitted for suits, attending planning meetings, smiling politely while Olivia's friends and family looked at him like something they'd scraped off their shoes. They all knew, maybe not the specific terms of the arrangement, but they knew he was poor and she was rich, and that was enough. He was marrying her for money. The fact that it was true made their contempt burn deeper. Through it all, Olivia remained distant and composed, speaking to him only when necessary, treating the wedding preparations with the same cool efficiency she probably brought to board meetings. Now, as she reached the altar and the officiant began the ceremony, Marcus felt the weight of every eye in the church. His daughter sat in the front row with his sister, her color good, her smile bright, completely unaware that her father had sold himself to keep her alive. His mother would have been heartbroken if she were still living. She'd raised him to believe in love, in marriage as something sacred, in the value of integrity over material wealth. He was betraying everything she'd taught him. The ceremony proceeded with mechanical precision. Marcus spoke his vows in a voice that didn't sound like his own, placing a ring on Olivia's finger that cost more than he used to make in 5 years. Her hands were small and soft, and he noticed for the first time that they trembled slightly. When it was her turn to speak, something strange happened. Her voice, usually so controlled and professional, cracked on the word cherish. She recovered quickly, but Marcus saw tears gathering in her dark eyes, and he didn't understand. Then came the moment that would change everything. The officiant announced they could kiss, and the room fell silent with anticipation. Marcus leaned down awkwardly, prepared for a brief, perfunctory touch of lips that would satisfy protocol and nothing more. But as his face neared hers, Olivia reached up and took his face in both hands, and she began to cry. Not delicate tears, but deep, shaking sobs that seemed to come from somewhere profound and broken inside her. The church erupted in confused murmurs, but Olivia didn't seem to hear or care. She pulled Marcus closer, her fingers gentle against his cheeks, and she whispered words that only he could hear. She told him she was sorry for making him do this, sorry for reducing something that should be sacred to a business transaction, sorry for being too afraid and damaged to believe anyone could want her for anything other than her money. She told him that watching him sacrifice his pride and principles to save his daughter had broken something open inside her, because she understood that kind of desperate love. She'd built her empire because her own father had died when she was young, leaving her mother with nothing, and Olivia had sworn no one she loved would ever be helpless again. The accident that took her ability to walk had also taken her fiancé, who'd left within a month, unable to handle being with someone broken. Since then, she'd told herself she didn't need love, didn't want it, that business and success were enough. But watching Marcus these past months, seeing how he looked at his daughter, how he endured humiliation and judgment without complaint because her life mattered more than his pride, had reminded her what it meant to actually love someone. And she'd realized she'd built a prison of wealth and isolation, and convinced herself it was a kingdom. Marcus, stunned, pulled back to look at her. Her face was wet with tears, vulnerable in a way he'd never seen, and something shifted in his chest. He'd spent months seeing her as the cold billionaire who'd bought him like property. But now he saw the woman underneath. Someone as lonely and broken and desperate as he was, just with better camouflage. Someone who'd forgotten that money could buy almost anything except the thing that actually mattered. If this story has moved you, if it has touched something in your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support means everything and helps us share more stories that matter. What happened next surprised everyone in that church, but none more than Marcus himself. He kissed her, truly kissed her, not with passion but with understanding, with the recognition of two wounded people who'd found each other in the worst possible way and might, just possibly, find something real in the wreckage. When they pulled apart, the room exploded in applause, though the guests didn't really understand what they were witnessing. The reception that followed was different. Marcus and Olivia talked, really talked, for the first time since they'd met. She told him about her fears and loneliness. He told her about his guilt and shame. They shared the stories of their scars, and somewhere in that honest exchange, something fragile and tentative began to grow. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was the possibility of love, which neither of them had expected or thought they deserved. Before we reach the end, if this story resonated with you, please take a moment to comment below and share your thoughts. Your words inspire us to keep creating meaningful content. 6 months later, long before their agreed year was up, Marcus and Olivia sat in the same glass tower office where he'd signed the contract. Lily played nearby, healthy and vibrant, calling Olivia by the name she'd chosen herself, not Mom but Liv, said with the easy affection of a child who knew she was loved. Together they tore up the contract, both of them crying and laughing, and wrote a new agreement. Not on paper, but in promises made with full hearts. Promises to choose each other every day, not because of money or obligation, but because sometimes the worst bargains lead to the best blessings, and sometimes you have to lose yourself completely to find out who you really are. Marcus had gone to that altar thinking he was selling his soul. Instead, he'd found it again, and in the process, helped someone else find theirs too. Their marriage had started as a transaction, but what it became was something neither money nor desperation could buy. It became real.